Hello and welcome to the Canon Sports Podcast. I am your host, Ryan from Canon Sports, and joining me today, the head coach of the Harvard-Westlake basketball team, David Rebibo. David, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Awesome, man. So, head coach of the Harvard-Westlake basketball team, 2016 state title, 2017 CIF Division I title, 3 years consecutive. The last 3 years, you were the Mission League champions. How we doing, man?
A lot of really good players. That's what that means. We've had a lot of really talented, high-achieving players who cared about one another and cared about this fantastic school.
That's awesome, man. So let's start from the start. Coach, where are you from?
Los Angeles, California, San Fernando Valley area. Born and raised in Panorama City. Moved to Woodland Hills and went to El Camino Real. Went and played at Valley College for a little bit, and then eventually transferred on to CSUN. Got my degree. Was thinking of moving into outside the box profession. Well, not outside the box, but in the family profession. Was thinking about going with my dad, who's a contractor, and working in his construction company. I was doing that for a little bit, and then a buddy of mine was like, hey, I run a youth league. Why don't you come coach in my youth league? And so I spoke to my dad, and I'm like, hey, we'll check it out. Why not? So I go, and I'm trying to manage both and this and that. And finally one day I go, hey, Dad, I think I'm gonna give the basketball a go. I want to go all in. And he was like, good, because you're not very good at construction. I'm glad this conversation's over. And
Yeah.
I coached in the youth league for like 3-4 years. I was doing private training, and then Russell White at Crespi gave me a call and was like, hey, I have a freshman position. Are you interested? Jumped on that. I was a freshman assistant in the summer. I was a freshman head coach. And heading into the fall, this was in the summer of 2007, heading into the fall, he goes, hey, I need a varsity assistant. Could you do both? I was like, absolutely. And so I would run my freshman practices in the morning, handle school in the afternoon, and then head back to Crespi for the varsity practices. And it was heaven. Like, I was basketball all day, right? And my responsibilities grew. And then sure enough, we had a great year. It was his first year at Crespi. He's a phenomenal coach. And then we headed over. I received a call from El Camino Real, my alma mater. Initially, I was like, no, I'm not interested. I kind of like what's going on here at Crespi. I kind of like what we're doing. And they said, okay. And then the principal called me, Dave Haiti, who was there, and he goes, hey, I'd like to meet with you. I was like, okay, I'll meet with you. When I met with him, the next day I accepted the job. Had to call Russell and talk to him about that. And I was a 23-year-old head coach at El Camino Real, trying to figure it out in what was, I think, the best or the second best or tied for first best league in the Valley at the time, with Taft at its peak, Cleveland, really, really high-functioning program, Birmingham, Granada Hills, well-coached, Chatsworth. I mean, it was high-level basketball, and I had to really dive in and figure it out early on, and it was a challenge. It was really cool and a great learning tool for me, while building a program that never had really high expectations, never had a high standard, in my opinion, from top to bottom. It was never ran as a year-round program that provided opportunity for kids to get better, grow, and facilitate growth throughout the year.
That's awesome, man. Now, when you were growing up in the Valley, when did you start playing basketball?
My dad was an avid Laker fan.
Yep.
So I was always in the driveway, like Magic Johnson, James Worthy, let's go, and I get a rebound, Kurt Rambis, like whatever I was doing, I was a different Laker. We'd always watch it. And I remember Shoot Park basketball was a big deal. And in order to get in the league, like, your parents had to wake up at like 5:30 in the morning and get in line at Shoot Park to get registered. And I think I'd gotten my parents to the point where at like 9 or 10 years old, they were like, we're going. leave us alone. We're going to register. And from there, I was in the league, and everything kind of worked itself out. So that's kind of how that went.
Yeah. Now, when you were playing, and you played in high school and at CSUN, and what was your position when you were a player?
I was a shooting guard, combo guard. CSUN, I hurt my knee and ended up not really playing as I transferred over. I was a solid player. I could shoot the ball. I was smart. I could do some things, but I was never athletic enough, or I never, I was average. I was an okay player.
All right. I mean, okay is better than most if you're playing in college, right? Now, when you were thinking about doing the construction with your dad, and then you start coaching the youth basketball. When does the bug kind of hit you of like, I like this?
I remember it was after the first practice that I went to. I was like,
and what age were these kids that you were coaching at that time?
It was 5th through 8th grade.
Okay.
And I remember just after the first practice, I was like, when's the next practice?
Yeah.
All right, I'll be here. And I didn't even check my work schedule with my dad. I was like, I'll be there.
Yeah.
And I remember like there were a few times I was like, I'm like, hey, I'm going to wake up at 6:30, Dad, start the day so I can get over. And he's just looking at me like, nobody's going to be anywhere at 6:30, dude. Like, what are you talking about? And I think he kind of knew, like, but he was like, hey, I'm going to let this play out a little bit from that standpoint. But I knew immediately this was my passion. I just love the game. I love everything about it. I can watch it religiously. I think about it when I wake up. I think about it as I'm going to bed. I think about how we're going to get better, what things I can do to get better. I'm seeking information constantly, just trying to grow.
Yeah. Yeah. Now moving from 5th to 8th graders, and then you start at Crespi. I'm assuming with 5th to 8th graders, it's a lot of fundamentals, kind of teaching them how the game works. Moving into high school, does the focus shift a little bit into X's and O's, or is it still a bit of the fundamentals? I mean, is it fundamentals always?
Yeah, I think it's fundamentals always. Our varsity team spends 10 to 20 minutes a day on pivots, passing, and mechanics, shooting, layups. Simple things as mic and drill. We do it every day, and I just think. We have so much information now. We have so much technology. We have so much video, and you have all these great players, trainers releasing information and content that kids want to get to that point, not realizing that stuff isn't good until you've gotten the basics mastered. And those guys have mastered the basics. People don't realize, like, you look at Kobe Bryant, the late great, but everything he did was predicated on footwork and pivots and basic fundamental shot fakes and things that he mastered and took the time to master so that his fadeaways, his step backs, and other things like that were effective, so to speak. And I think we just don't see that. And, there's a desire to get better and enhance your game. And I think along the road, we're skipping steps. And in skipping steps, we're finding kids who can make great moves but don't understand, like, just jump stop, pivot, make a simple play, and the beauty's in simplicity, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, as you're talking about your dad, I'm reminded of my own dad, he was a basketball coach himself at Sarah High School in Los Angeles, avid Laker fan, and to this day, I actually called my mom when they were in the playoffs last year. It was like, his dad yelling defense and a rebound right now? She goes, he has been yelling defense and a rebound at the TV. And, when I was a kid, like, just the chest pass he would teach me. I mean, I grew up to be about 5'10". So my basketball dreams are dashed early, but him as a coach was, wave goodbye to the ball, the chest pass, the pivots and all that. And I think what you're saying is absolutely true. Now moving into El Camino Real, 23 years old, head coach. You're 5 years older than the seniors at that point. I mean, what was the learning curve for you of going from, I'm assuming as an assistant, you're kind of focused on the plays on the floor, on the drills and all that.
Yep.
What did you learn in your first head coaching experience? What all came with that role?
Well, the first thing that you learn is that leaving Crespi, I was just a coach.
Right.
When I went to El Camino, I was the director of operations, the director of fundraising, the video guy. I was, and coach, and you're trying to teach, and you're trying to manage, and you're a manager of your staff. You have to build the staff. It was like you talk about being thrown in the fire. I was burning, and in every way. It was an incredible learning experience. Just from managing, I think that the number one thing that coaches are and need to learn how to do is to manage. It's kind of why I've been intrigued by baseball, because they're not coaches, they're managers, right? And I've always wondered, like, why? And after my first 2 years at El Camino, I was like, oh, I get it. We're like, yeah, we coach, but we're really managing, and we need to manage your staff. You need to manage your different levels. You need to manage parents. You need to manage your players and how they interact and the things that we can do and how we team build and all those factors before you get to coach. Because if those things aren't in line, the coaching's miserable. And that was something I really took to heart, and really, as my first year, I remember getting a notebook, and this was advised to me by a good friend of mine. He said, hey, every week or every day you should be writing notes on things that you liked, you didn't like, things that you managed and mismanaged. And I was like, and I to this day, I can remember certain things. Hey, I didn't handle this well. I didn't respond to this appropriately. I needed to be more organized here. And I think those things, being able to reflect, were a huge part of my growth and development.
Yeah. Now with high schoolers, and in talking about kind of the aspects of management versus the aspects of coaching and everything, how important is it to get your players in the right mindset and into like a team mode of do your job kind of a deal?
The do your job statement, if you'd probably talk to our players and they said, hey, what's the number one thing Coach Rebibo says? It's do your job. And it's almost to a point where I think they got me a hat that said, instead of it saying just do it was like, just do your job.
Yeah.
1 year for a banquet. But, with all of this, with doing your job, I think that there has to be two things have to happen. One, you have to create a vision, and that vision has to be bought into, right? It has to be seen. That vision has to be portrayed to your players so that there could be buy-in. The next part is you got to get them connected, and they got to know how much you care and how important it is that they care before any of this can come to fruition. I think that's a huge component. Last year, I thought, for a COVID year was one of our toughest years. And I didn't think it was because of COVID restrictions. It was because I wasn't able to connect with our guys as much as I'd like. Yeah. I wasn't able to go have lunch with them. I wasn't able to do like team meals and go, hey, we're going to go walk to Sharky's after a practice, or hey, we're going to go do this, or we're going to go, run on the beach, or whatever the case may be, and then go get lunch. Like, we weren't able to do any of that. And so it was literally come in, practice, leave, play, leave. And that was rough, you know, from that standpoint for me as a connector. Yeah. And I think it's why early on it was, obviously you're trying to fit a whole season's worth into 3 weeks, 2 weeks of preparation, which was difficult in itself. But the ability to connect those dots, the root of that to me is relationships and presenting a vision and having that opportunity to present that. Yeah.
Now you're at El Camino Real High School from 2007 to 2013. You won city championships in 2010 and 2012. So obviously having some success there, where it sounds like there wasn't much of a basketball culture before you got there. And then you take a position as an assistant coach at the University of San Francisco. What was the difference that you saw going from a high school to now you're in the NCAA coaching college kids?
So, by the time I left El Camino, when I first got to El Camino, I would say, practice ended and it was a ghost town. Mm-hmm. By the time I left El Camino, practice ended and it was like, all right, guys, it ended an hour ago. Let's go. Get out of the gym. Yeah. We had some kids who really loved the game and they wanted to play in college. As you take it up a level, and as I was approaching San Francisco, you meet so many different kids from so many different areas. I think you really learn that the relationship factor is even more vital because they're away from home, they're away from family, they're away from friends, and in some cases, this is their out, right? This is this is how I'm going to make it in life. I'm going to get to the NBA. I'm going to play overseas. In other cases, it's like, hey, this is just an avenue, and I love it, but whatever. I know I'm not going to play in the NBA. So there are all these different processes and thoughts, for these guys, but they all were incredibly talented, passionate, and had an incredible work ethic. And a lot of that was instilled by our head coach, Rex Walters, who was an incredible worker himself, playing at the University of Kansas and playing in the NBA. He was a worker. He loved to be in the gym, and his guys had to work. So seeing that from that standpoint was really great. The other thing, and this is just, not every Division I team has really good players. You're not. Now, most high school teams have a good player or two, but not all of them are Division I players, and doesn't mean they're not talented or beauty in the eye of the beholder. So we all get that, but the University of San Diego and the University of San Francisco are not. They're competing, and it's going to be a grind, and it's going to be a close game where, it's no different. There's no nights off. There's no easy. Your process is totally different, and at that level, your livelihood's on the line too, right? Mm-hmm. You lose enough, you're out. You win enough, you maybe get more. You maybe don't.
Yeah, and you're bringing up the University of San Diego. That's my alma mater. So I remember some of those USD, USF games, and I remember the atmosphere, like when a Gonzaga comes to town, when a St. Mary's comes to town. And coming from high school to then going there, I mean, what's that atmosphere like? All of a sudden, you're playing against Gonzaga, or St. Mary's in an NCAA Division I game. I mean, that's got to be, for you being on the floor, it got to be electric.
Totally. It was incredible, the fan experience there, and the way they do their jobs, and the way they kind of bring it all together. The fan experience is just awesome. And I know, it was something that really stood out to me. It reminded me of high school. We had gotten to the point where our student section, when I left El Camino, it was a thing.
Right.
And you go to Gonzaga games, it's not just a game. Yeah. It's a thing, you got to be there. It's a party, right? We're having a good time, and BYU is no different. We would show up, 2 hours before, and you got guys getting out there an hour and a half, getting some shots up, and then we start our warm-up an hour before game time. They're there 2.5, 3 hours before, getting ready, getting organized. Electric. I mean, just awesome. And St. Mary's no different. Seeing all those environments, going to Oregon, going to Colorado, just special, really special, really cool.
Now, after San Francisco in 2015, you get the job at Harvard-Westlake. What was it that was appealing to you about coming back to the college game, taking a head coaching position, and being at a place like Harvard-Westlake?
Growing up in the San Fernando Valley, you always saw Harvard-Westlake. You always saw the talent. You always saw the monster teams and the success. And I always just thought to myself, man, it feels like a mini college, you know, geez, and it's an independent private school, and they're clearly do a fantastic job on the academic side, and athletics are really competitive. So it was always a job man, that's a really good job. And then I had heard that, I'd gotten word that the job was going to be opening, and the athletic department reached out and, hey, would you be interested? We know you did a great job at El Camino. We know you're at USF. And I'm like, yeah, of course I'm interested. Listen, some of that was less college-induced and more getting back home, you don't realize it. California's so big, but you go from Southern California to Northern California, you might as well be in a different state. Might as well be in a different country, honestly. It is so different, man. I was just my first year, I was just culture shock. I just want a burrito. Why do I have to drive around 45 minutes to find a parking spot? I'll just Uber. Forget it. I'll Uber 5 minutes because you can't walk because it's uphill, downhill, and you're just dying. And that's the point. I got to the point where I was like, I'm going to walk or I'm going to Uber. Just that culture shock alone was incredible. But, I just saw something here, and I heard the passion in the administration's voice. It just excited me, And I I truly felt like this is a place I could be for a very long time and build something incredibly special.
Now, what were you able to bring from your experiences in the college game, even from your experiences at El Camino, where you came in 23 years old, your first head coaching job, you're kind of, hitting the ground running and learning. And now at this point, when you get to Harvard-Westlake, you've got the years of experience, you've got some NCAA experiences. What do you think you had learned as a coach that you were able to bring here?
From El Camino, I brought managing. First thing, like we're gonna build strong relationships. We're gonna hire incredible staff, and we're managing this top to bottom. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. But we're gonna manage. Like we've got to make sure there's a culture set in place as far as, a culture of expectations. And I know culture gets thrown around a lot, and I value culture, but I think where that lies is in your expectations. And if your expectations and standards are too low or too high, your culture will suffer. So I think finding that balance. So the first thing we want to do is set expectations. And the expectation was we're going to compete at the highest level year in and year out. In order to do that, we're going to go get the best staff we can. And then that was something we did. And then from there, it's in sharing that vision with your staff regularly, I think is so incredibly important. So those were the things from El Camino that I wanted to bring. As it pertained to USF, obviously I learned a ton. When you have scouts, you're watching 5 games of every team that they play, that you're going to play. So if we're playing St. Mary's, I'm watching St. Mary's last 5 games. Well, I'm not just watching St. Mary's. I'm watching who they're playing, what they're doing. Like the amount of knowledge you gain just watching and absorbing information and learning from a great coach and a great staff that we had at USF was invaluable, truly invaluable. So bringing that stuff that I learned from the college game, as well as how to prepare for the college level, what was the stuff that I really valued as it pertained to USF. The thing about team and like just general culture building at USF is really hard at the college level because your team can change year to year.
Yeah.
Your kids are totally different kids. Like we're not talking about kids who are SoCal based going to private schools. You're talking about kids who grew up in Kansas City and they're scraping by or whatever the case may be. Like it just different socioeconomic statuses and these just total different. My kids from Australia, kids from so the relatability of like team building and all that stuff. Like we did a lot of team building stuff, but it's totally different when you've got kids for 4 years that are going to be here, as opposed to kids who year to year, it's a year to year contract and they can do whatever they want. And frankly, so can you as a head coach, right? Mm-hmm. So that standpoint, it was hard to connect, but my number one thing in trying to connect with USF was, hey, this is how we're going to prepare kids for college. This is how we're going to prepare for games. This is how we're going to build, and these are the components that we can bring, to the high school level, to Harvard-Westlake.
Now, you got off to, I would say, almost immediate success. 2016, you win the state title. 2017, you win the CIF Division I title. The last 3 years, you guys are Mission League champs. What has been the process of getting the teams, getting the kids to buy in, to do your job, to the culture that you've created, And we're talking about now back to teenagers where, I'd say in a lot of ways, teenagers are still discovering who they are.
Totally.
You've got them at this very formidable moment in their lives. How do you get kids that maybe don't want to listen or that think they're better than they are, to buy into this vision of the team?
It's one of the biggest challenges. I think with success comes a level of buy-in and fit in, right? And by buying in, hey, well, I want to get there. So what do I need to do? So I'm going to try to buy in. And then fit in. Well, this is what that guy does, and this is what this guy does, and they play a lot. So this is where I can fit in. And I think we sell that a lot, across the board. I've told, we'll make a general blanketed statement like, hey, the best player is going to play. But if you're a rising sophomore and you're even with our 12th or 13th guy who maybe don't get very many minutes, we're not bringing you up.
Right.
even if you're better than that guy, because that guy doesn't play. We're going to get you your experience that you need, and then you need to come and watch the guys that are and figure out what they're doing. So I think we're very transparent in our process, and we've built a year-round program where it's hard not to get better. And our schools provided incredible resources to get better. We have 4 full-time strength and conditioning coaches, 4 full-time trainers. The gym is accessible. Our coaches are accessible. And, you know, we've got some really talented players who continue to get better because of the guys ahead of them, the guys who've come before them. And this, you know, I would tell you this started before my time at Harvard-Westlake. The banners on these walls here go way back before my time. But I think our success lies in the program that we've established and set up for our players, the vision that we provide, which is constant, and evolving and, you know, changing, right, to a degree, good or bad, and just the constant communication and managing of how we're going to proceed. I will tell you, like, we have a system, but year to year that system changes because our personnel changes, our kids change, they get better. We want to do more. They get worse, maybe, you know, hopefully not, then fine. They stay the same, then maybe we need to stay the same. But do we stay the same, or do we try to push them and make them uncomfortable?
Yeah.
And these are all things that we experiment and talk with and evaluate constantly. And I think as you do that, you find that kids want to please in general. Players want to please. Yes, they have goals. Yes, they have aspirations. But when you get them to realize the importance of winning, the value of doing things hard, smart, and the right way and together, when you get them to understand that, yes, you could score 20, but if your three-point shooting percentage is 28% and your field goal percentage overall is 33%, 35%, you're of no value. Because your greatest value to any college or NBA team is your production, the percentage in which you produce, and your ability to win.
Yeah. Now talking about, and you know, El Camino, San Francisco, Harvard-Westlake, you've seen your fair share of very good players. Is there, in talking about the fundamentals and the work that's done kind of away from practice, like I think about a guy like Kobe or even somebody like Mia Hamm, who, you know, the story with Mia Hamm I can remember was always like, the work she does nobody sees. Was there correlations that you saw in some of the great players that you saw come through in terms of the work that they do when nobody else, you know, outside of team practice, when they're on their own at home?
Totally. You know, from Johnny Juzang is one of the first guys that sticks out because he was here my second year. In his freshman year, super talented, but he always had a desire for more. And heading into his sophomore year, I remember I got to school one day at like 6:15, and I looked out on the turf field, and I see Johnny running. Yeah. And I'm like, oh, God, what's he doing? You know, like, and sure enough, he's just like, Coach, you told me I needed to be in great shape this year, that I could play 32 minutes, so I'm just trying to mentally. And I was like, I just kind of was like, wowed. Even, you know, being in college, like I never saw guys on the turf running. We saw guys in the gym at 6:30. And
sure.
Well, he would go straight from the turf at 6:45, 6:50, 7, and come up here and shoot for 40 minutes before school also. And I was just like, man, okay, like we got a guy here. Like, so my next thing to him was like, hey, can you bring somebody with you now? Like, that's the journey, right? And he was like, well, okay, do you think somebody else is going to play 32? I'm like, well, we need to prepare everybody, right? And he was just like, oh, okay, you know, and he got it. And he was just a religious worker. Another story that stuck out to me was, can't remember what Super Bowl it was, but I want to say it was New England, Philadelphia, when they were playing in the Super Bowl. And I was at a Super Bowl deal, and one of our athletic directors was there, and he's like, hey, anybody in the gym? I was like, no, who would be in the gym? So he turns on the camera, and he goes, Johnny's in the gym shooting. And Super Bowl Sunday, like 8:30, we're heading into playoffs. And he's just by himself, and we'd look, and he'd been in there for over 2 hours, just shooting by himself, you know, on Super Bowl Sunday. Yeah. You know, very rare. Now, I will tell you, we've had kids with great work ethics: Mason Hooks, Truman Gedding, Spencer Hubbard, Holden McRae, Brace Dotton, Cameron Thrower, Brady Dunlap, you know, the Landon Lewises of the world. The list goes on and on and on, who are incredible who still continue to work to this day, and we've got to be like, hey, let's rein it in a little bit. And I think because they've seen this success and they've heard these stories, they want to match that. And then you hear the Kobe's and the this and that's, and we've had to explain to our guys a few times, like, yeah, Kobe woke up at 4 and did his thing, and then he went back. That was in the off season.
Right.
Kobe wanted to be his best when the lights were brightest and when there were fans in the seats. So he managed himself appropriately. Like, you don't hear that story, and he still worked. He still was probably the first to practice shooting. He still stayed after to shoot. So there's still that. Don't get me wrong, but let's not forget, like, he wasn't up at 4 a.m. on a game day.
Right.
He was getting his rest, you know, and so we've had to kind of manage that and talk about that. But those stick out to me.
Absolutely. Now with coaching high schoolers, and obviously, you know, you've got some really great players, you've got some really hardworking players, but the vast majority of these players probably are not going to play at the next level or in the pros. What do you hope to teach your kids beyond the game of basketball that they can take with them?
You know, the number one thing is you got to show up, right? And you got to show up with the right mindset, whether you feel good, bad, or indifferent. We said this the other day. It's like, hey, we don't have to practice. We get to practice. And that, you know, we've got a few injuries and a few guys banged up, so practices are a little bit harder for guys because there's less breaks and whatnot because we have less bodies. And I said, you know, all that is an opportunity for everybody right here now to get more. So now instead of you just playing your natural, you're playing the point, you're playing this, you're getting all these extra reps, which are invaluable. And I said, so we got to get back to the we get to instead of we have to mindset. So that's a big thing. Showing up is a huge thing. Understanding that if you want more, you got to go get more. And staying the course, right? Adversity is something that we constantly embrace, not run from. You know, it is something that I'm challenging our guys and our families to embrace because it's inevitable. You know, I read a few books during the COVID break, and just, you know, a bunch of things stuck out to me. But the bottom line is, hey, we're preparing the road for the child. We're preparing the child for the road, not the road for the child.
Yeah.
And I think that mantra is something that we as coaching staff embrace and value.
Yeah. Now, along that same line, how do you measure your successes as a coach, both on the court and off the court? You know,
on the court, you just want your guys to do their job and get better, right? We create a platform for our players, and the reality is being at the college level, like I understand like the 6-foot shooting guard is probably not as big of a commodity or a highly sought-after prospect at the Division I level as is a 6'1", 6'2" point guard.
Right.
So we try to put guys in positions to where they're going to maximize their potential and max out on that potential, right?
Yeah.
Whether so I'm a 6'2" point guard. Here's my opportunity, and if a D1 school likes me, great. And if they don't, well, then it is what it is. It's beauty in the eye of the beholder. So we try and do that for our players and make sure that we're putting them in the best position possible, with the understanding like basketball is moving to positionless basketball, so that versatility is just major of a major importance, just because of where it's going. The next part is for me is are our guys believing and buying in? Because I believe if we get them in the right spots, if we get them believing and trying to do the right things, the scoreboard is going to fix itself. Yeah. That doesn't worry me as much. And I really get into that process of it all. Post-playing career, it's when they come back. We still have guys from my first year who had just met me, and knew me for 8 months, who still come back and check in. And I think that's the biggest thing. And just reaching out and, they'll message me like, hey, great picture, coach. Like, what were you thinking? Or, just talking trash and whatnot. That part to me is really cool. Having a Johnny Juzang like me go by UCLA practice and him text me like, hey, what'd you think?
Yeah.
Where was I at there? What hey, coach, I'm thinking about transferring from Kentucky. Like, what schools should I consider? What do you think? Hey, would you mind being involved? That stuff. Talking to the parents still, hearing from Mason Hook, all these guys. That's the joy for me. That's the awesome part of the journey.
Yeah. Absolutely. Now, as we wind down, this is a question that I like to finish with for all of the interviews. For you in your life, what does sports mean to you, and what has it done for you?
Man, sports is everything. I'm a competitor by nature. My wife doesn't even want to play like Uno with me, let alone like Monopoly. Yeah. She's like, you're always competing. You're always. I know. I'm sorry. So I live and breathe competition. One of the hardest parts of the pandemic was I just didn't compete. Yeah. I found myself beginning to compete with myself. I would go on like 3-mile run. Okay, now today I'm gonna try 4. Now today I'm gonna try 5. Now I'm up to 6 and 7, and then I was like, what am I doing? Like, and then my Achilles is hurting, and I'm like, dude, you're not that guy. Like, stop. But I'm a competitor. But I'm also a relationship guy. I love the interaction. I love the relationship component. I love getting to spend time with our guys and see them get better and grow. Like, that's a huge, huge thing for me throughout this whole process, and watching the helping and enhancing that maturation process is a big part of this deal for me, coaching and competing. And I just think that's great. Like, to see a kid like Cameron Thrower who as a freshman was trying to figure it out, and as a sophomore, hey, I have to accept my role, and as a junior I get to shine in a little bit. Now my senior year, I'm committed to Penn before my senior year, and I'm going to an Ivy League school. Yeah, I did it. That is that's the journey. And Landon Lewis, no different. Landon, as a freshman, was hurt. As a sophomore, was hurt. As a junior, kind of bounced, not bounced around, but was injured in and out of the lineup a little bit because of injury. And then, boom, I'm committed to Brown, and now my senior year, I get to do it. Like, those stories, like, that's where I get to, like, sit back and relax and take a deep breath and be like, it's all worth it. It's all the craziness, all the social media, it's all worth it. And I think that's a big part of it. And for our players, the biggest thing I want them to leave with is, hey, coach pushed me. He was tough on me. He was fair to me, and he got me better. Yeah. And he helped me, and hopefully he helped me become a successful adult in life. Like, I can be a functional adult in life and handle majority of situations that come at me, in whatever capacity. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. Well, Coach David Rebibo, Harvard-Westlake, starting off the season in a couple weeks. Best of luck to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you guys so much for watching. I've been Ryan from Cannon Sports. If you want to check us out, we are on Instagram at Cannon Sports. We are on TikTok at Cannon Sports Official. Check out our YouTube channel. And, of course, check out cannonsports.com for all your sporting goods needs. Thank you guys so much, and we'll see you next time.